The film kicks off in Tegucigalpa, where a young girl named Rocio is seen creating a rhythmic beat with her slippers, singing with a sweet voice. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and Rocio answers to find a woman named Giselle. Giselle offers an opportunity to enroll Roberto's children, Miguel and Rocio, in child modeling contracts. Roberto, the struggling father, agrees due to his financial situation and takes them to the photo shoot. Upon arrival, Giselle instructs Roberto that parents are not allowed and to return later. However, upon his return, he discovers his children are missing. Frightened and bewildered, with no knowledge of his children's whereabouts, he wanders around desperately searching for them. In Calexico, California, Special Agent Tim Ballard is on a stakeout mission focused on observing the notorious criminal Ernst Oshinsky, who is involved in the distribution and creation of explicit images. Tim, along with his partner, urgently needs the data stored on Ernst's computer. They quietly infiltrate his house to ensure he doesn't have the chance to log off and potentially lose crucial evidence. Successfully catching him off guard, they arrest him and, in the process, uncover numerous videos and files detailing the heinous acts he has committed. This emotionally demanding work significantly impacts Tim's personal life, and the situation takes a darker turn when a fellow agent named Chris points out that they have apprehended numerous predators but haven't managed to rescue a single child. Tim rationalizes that most of these children are in other countries, but Chris's words leave a lasting impression on him. To gather more information, Tim engages in a conversation with a predator he had previously arrested, Ernst Oshinsky. He adopts a guise of being a predator himself to earn Ernst's trust over several days, ultimately revealing his intention to purchase a child. Consequently, Ernst arranges a meeting with a human trafficker named Earl Buchanan. Unaware of Tim's undercover role, they convene for dinner where Ernst discreetly hands over a book containing information about the child, who turns out to be Miguel. Armed with this vital evidence, Tim dramatically unveils that the entire situation was a ruse, and Ernst is promptly rearrested. With Earl Buchanan identified as the human trafficker, Tim and the other law enforcement officers set up a sting operation to intercept Earl at the US-Mexico border. As the van reaches the crossing point, Tim spots Earl and the missing child in the back seat. They move swiftly, apprehending Earl and successfully rescuing the boy. Tim establishes a connection with Miguel while sharing a meal, gently inquiring about the circumstances in the hope of finding leads to rescue more children. From Miguel, he discovers that after the photo shoot, the kids were loaded into a van and transported to an undisclosed location, where unknown men placed them in a container and shipped them across the ocean. Tim also learns that Miguel's sister is among the missing children, and the boy implores him to save her. Tim arranges for Roberto to be reunited with his son, although it's a heartbreaking moment as Roberto realizes Rocio is still missing. Miguel and Roberto eventually head home, but before they depart, Miguel presents Tim with his sister's Timothy necklace. Committed to fulfilling his promise to Miguel, Tim pays a visit to the incarcerated Earl Buchanan. After some persuasive dialogue, Earl eventually gives in and shares information that could potentially lead to Rocio's whereabouts. Tim promptly informs his captain that he will be traveling to Cartagena, Colombia, to locate the girl. Upon arriving in Colombia, Tim meets with a trusted local police officer and a friend named Jorge. Tim discusses his purpose for being in Colombia, and Jorge believes he might know someone who can assist. Jorge takes him to a nightclub operated by a former cartel accountant, Vampiro, who has turned his focus toward rescuing children from traffickers. As the two get to know each other, they share their common purpose, which is the rescue and reunification of children with their families. Vampiro observes the deep commitment in Tim's eyes when it comes to saving children, and he agrees to join forces. As a former cartel member, he is familiar with the individuals behind these trafficking operations. He discloses to Tim that Giselle is responsible for abducting children and selling them. Vampiro also elaborates on her modus operandi, where, using her background as a former Miss Cartagena, she persuades parents in impoverished areas with promises of a brighter future for their children as models, but the children never return. Having come across news about the shutdown of a sex club in Thailand, Tim believes this could serve as an ideal cover story to execute a large-scale sting operation and rescue a substantial number of Giselle's victims. Tim shares this elaborate plan with Vampiro, outlining their intention to establish a similar club in Colombia. The plan involves charging affluent clients exorbitant fees for memberships. Tim introduces a wealthy individual named Paul, who loves playing hero and is willing to provide financial support for Tim's mission. To execute this plan, Vampiro will introduce an associate of Giselle to Tim, who is posing as a prosperous businessman, keen on forming a partnership with a local figure, with the authority to grant approvals in the area. This strategic setup aims to gain Giselle's trust and ensure the credibility of their cover story. In the midst of these preparations, Tim receives an unexpected call from Frost, his captain back in the U.S., who orders him to abort the search and return immediately. However, Tim is resolute in his determination not to abandon the mission to find Rocio. He makes the difficult choice to resign from his position and remain in Colombia, to continue his search for the missing girl. The plan is set in motion. It begins with the purchase of an island, the ideal location for their planned club. They also secure a luxury apartment for their meetings, designed to give the impression that they are successful businessmen. The concept of a club on a private island excites Giselle, leading her to agree to a meeting with Tim and the others. That evening, Giselle arrives at the penthouse suite via a helicopter. Both sides introduce themselves, and Tim, leading the operation, informs Giselle that for her to become a partner in this venture, she must provide 54 children. On the private island, Tim and his fellow police officers discreetly install bugs and video cameras, while they patiently await the arrival of everyone involved. The aim of this operation is to liberate as many children as possible, with the anticipation that Rocio might be among them, and to apprehend Giselle for her involvement in child trafficking. When Giselle arrives with her associates, Jorge is strategically positioned on the opposite side of the island, leading a squad of agents prepared to intervene and detain those responsible. Tim makes a crucial observation. He spots that Rocio is not among the group of children. Tim signals Jorge to proceed with the arrests. Jorge, along with the other agents, descends on the island, taking into custody all the traffickers and ensuring the safety of the children. After interrogating one of Giselle's associates, Jorge uncovers the distressing news that Rocio was sold as a slave to the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, deep within the Amazon's uncharted wilderness, far behind enemy lines. Jorge conveys to Tim the daunting challenges of attempting a rescue, as the region is predominantly unmapped jungle territory, and any rebel-held area is considered a no-fly zone for the Colombian government. However, Vampiro proposes the idea that doctors might gain access to the region under the pretext of providing medical assistance. Inspired by this suggestion, Tim decides to pose as a doctor. Though Jorge is hesitant, he eventually agrees to this perilous operation. Tim and Vampiro embarked on a boat journey up the river, on a mission to locate the rebel camp. They were posing as medical professionals delivering vaccines, while Jorge remained by the river with a car as a backup. During their journey up the river, they encountered another boat manned by armed rebels. The rebels questioned their presence, prompting Tim to clarify that they were doctors transporting essential medical supplies. The armed rebels relayed this information to their leader, who decided that only one of them should be brought to their camp. Tim willingly volunteered to go, while Vampiro stayed behind. While navigating the dense jungle terrain, they eventually reached the rebel camp, where the rebels were employing people as forced labor to cultivate coca plants, which they used to finance their conflict against the Colombian government. After undergoing interrogation by the rebel leader known as El Alacran, Tim successfully gained entry into the enemy camp. Inside, he discovered that Rocio was being held as a personal slave for the rebel leader, and she was forced into processing coca leaves. Tim managed to rescue Rocio, but regrettably, he had to eliminate El Alacran during the rescue operation. Under the cover of darkness, they stealthily made their way to the river and commandeered a rebel boat, which they used to return to the location where Jorge was waiting. Despite being targeted by rebel gunfire, Tim narrowly escaped with his life. Tim narrowly pulls off the rescue of Rocio and presents her with the necklace Miguel had entrusted to him earlier. Rocio is eventually reunited with her father and brother, and the family makes their way back to Honduras. In the epilogue, it is disclosed that Tim Ballard chose not to resume his federal law enforcement career. Instead, he attributes his wife as the driving force behind the establishment of Operation Underground Railroad, an organization that remains dedicated to rescuing children from slavery up to the present day.